Zara's fingers danced across the holographic keyboard, her eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of data before her. The lab hummed with the soft whir of quantum processors, their cool blue glow casting eerie shadows on the stark white walls. At 17, she was the youngest member of the Quantum Leap Project, a secret initiative aimed at unlocking the mysteries of parallel universes. Come on, she muttered, biting her lower lip as she input the final sequence. The vortex pulsed, expanding and contracting like a living, breathing entity. Zara held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. Months of sleepless nights, endless calculations, and more than a few blown circuits had led to this moment. A blinding flash filled the room, forcing Zara to shield her eyes. When she lowered her arm, her jaw dropped. Where the vortex had been, a shimmering portal now hovered, its edges rippling like water. Through it, she could see herself. But not quite. The other Zara wore a lab coat, just like her. But her hair was cut short, and a thin scar ran along her left cheek. Their eyes met across the divide between universes, and Zara felt a jolt of electricity run through her body. It worked, both Zara said in unison, their voices a perfect match. Before either could say more, alarms blared throughout the lab. Red lights flashed, and the portal began to fluctuate wildly. Zara's fingers flew over the keyboard, trying to stabilize the connection, but it was too late. With a thunderous crack, the portal collapsed, leaving behind a faint smell of ozone and 1,000 unanswered questions. Zara slumped in her chair, her mind reeling. She had done it. She had opened a doorway to another universe. But at what cost? The lab's security system was going haywire, and she could hear the pounding of feet in the corridor outside. She had mere seconds before her unauthorized experiment was discovered. Quickly, she initiated the emergency data wipe, erasing all traces of her work. As the door burst open and security flooded in, Zara plastered an innocent look on her face. "I don't know what happened," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Everything just went crazy." Dr. Emerson, the project lead, pushed his way through the crowd, his bushy eyebrows furrowed in concern. "Zara, are you all right? What were you doing in here so late?" She shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Just running some simulations, Doctor." "Emerson, I must have triggered something by accident." He studied her for a long moment, his piercing blue eyes seeming to look right through her. Finally, he nodded. "Well, no harm done, it seems. But please, in the future, clear any after-hours work with me first." Zara nodded, relief washing over her. She had gotten away with it. For now. As the crowd dispersed and the alarms were silenced, Zara couldn't shake the image of her other self from her mind. What was that other universe like? How had that Zara's life differed from her own? And most importantly, could she recreate the portal? Over the next few weeks, Zara threw herself into her official work, trying to appear as normal as possible. But every spare moment was devoted to secretly rebuilding her experiment. She knew the risks were enormous. If she were caught, she'd be kicked off the project for sure, possibly even arrested. But the lure of discovery was too strong to resist. Late one night, as she was poring over her calculations, a soft knock at the door made her jump. She quickly minimized her work and called out, "Come in." To her surprise, it was Axel, her fellow researcher and closest friend on the project. His unruly mop of curly hair was even more disheveled than usual, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd been working late too. "Hey, Zara," he said, flopping into a chair beside her. "Thought I might find you here. You've been pretty scarce lately." Zara forced a smile. "Yeah, just been really focused on work, you know." Axel nodded, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Uh-huh. And does this work have anything to do with the incident last month?" Zara's heart skipped a beat. "What? No, of course not. That was just a glitch in the system." "Come on, Z," Axel said, leaning forward. "I know you better than that. Something happened that night, something big, and you've been acting weird ever since." For a moment, Zara considered continuing the lie. But Axel had been her friend since they joined the project together 2 years ago. If there was anyone she could trust, it was him. With a deep breath, she spilled everything. The secret experiment, the portal, seeing her alternate self. Axel listened in stunned silence, his eyes growing wider with each revelation. When she finished, he let out a low whistle. "Holy quantum entanglement, Zara. Do you realize what this means?" "You've done it. You've actually done it." Zara nodded, a mix of pride and fear coursing through her. "I know. But Axel, I can't recreate it. I've tried everything, but I can't get the portal to stabilize again." Axel's brow furrowed in thought. "Maybe you're missing something. Some variable you haven't considered." He paused, then grinned. "Well, looks like you could use a partner in crime. Count me in." Zara felt a wave of relief wash over her. With Axel's help, maybe she could crack this puzzle after all. Together, they spent every free moment working on the portal, refining calculations and running simulations. Weeks turned into months, and while they made progress, the elusive breakthrough remained just out of reach. As they worked, Zara found herself growing closer to Axel. She had always appreciated his quick wit and brilliant mind, but now she saw a different side of him. His unwavering support and dedication touched her in ways she hadn't expected. More than once, she caught herself staring at him as he worked, admiring the way his brow furrowed in concentration, or how his eyes lit up when he had a new idea. One night, as they were poring over the latest test results, Axel suddenly sat up straight. "Zara, I think I've got it. Look at this energy signature. It's not just about the quantum fluctuations. There's a temporal component we've been missing." Zara leaned in, her eyes scanning the data. As she processed what she was seeing, excitement bubbled up inside her. "Axel, you're a genius. This could be the key to stabilizing the portal." In their excitement, they turned to each other at the same moment. Their faces were inches apart, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to stand still. Zara could see the flecks of gold in Axel's brown eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath. Without thinking, she leaned in and kissed him. For a moment, Axel froze, surprised. Then he kissed her back, his hand gently cupping her face. When they finally pulled apart, both were slightly breathless. "Wow," Axel said softly. "I've been wanting to do that for a long time." Zara felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Me too," she admitted. I didn't want to complicate things." Axel laughed. "Zara, we're trying to open portals to parallel universes. I think we left uncomplicated behind a long time ago." She couldn't help but laugh too. He was right, of course. And as scary as it was to admit her feelings, it also felt incredibly right. With renewed energy, they threw themselves back into their work. The temporal component Axel had discovered proved to be the missing piece they needed. Over the next few weeks, they refined their calculations, modifying the quantum processors to account for the new variable. Finally, on a crisp autumn night, they were ready to test their theory. The lab was empty, except for them, everyone else having gone home hours ago. Zara's hand hovered over the activation switch, trembling slightly. "You ready for this?" Axel asked, his voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. Zara nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." With a deep breath, she flipped the switch. The familiar vortex of data appeared, swirling and pulsing. But this time, instead of collapsing, it began to stabilize. The edges sharpened, the center cleared, and suddenly, they were looking through a window into another world. It was their lab, but different. The equipment was more advanced, sleeker, and there, standing on the other side, were their counterparts. The other Zara with her short hair and scarred cheek, and another Axel, his curly hair streaked with gray, despite his young age. For a long moment, both pairs simply stared at each other, awe and disbelief etched on their faces. Then, slowly, the other Zara raised her hand in greeting. Zara and Axel did the same. "It worked," Zara breathed. It actually worked. But before they could celebrate further, a commotion on the other side of the portal caught their attention. The other Zara and Axel turned, fear suddenly evident on their faces. Zara could hear muffled shouting, the sound of running feet. The other Axel turned back to the portal, his face urgent. He mouthed something, but Zara couldn't make it out. Then, to her shock, he began to climb through. "Wait," Zara cried. But it was too late. The other Axel tumbled through the portal, landing hard on their lab floor. Behind him, the other Zara reached out, as if to follow, but then hesitated. With one last, longing look at her counterpart, she turned and ran, disappearing from view. The portal flickered and died, leaving Zara and Axel staring in shock at their unexpected visitor. The other Axel groaned, slowly pushing himself to his feet. He looked around wildly, his eyes finally settling on Zara and Axel. "Thank God," he said, his voice identical to their Axel's but rougher, more strained. "We don't have much time." "They're coming." "Who's coming?" Zara asked, helping him to his feet. "What's going on?" The other Axel's eyes were haunted as he answered. "The quantum police. In our world, they control all access to parallel universes, and they'll stop at nothing to maintain that control." Zara and Axel exchanged alarmed glances. This was far beyond anything they had anticipated. Their simple quest for knowledge had just become infinitely more complicated. "We need to shut down the equipment," Axel said, moving towards the control panel. "If these quantum police can track the portal." "It's too late for that," the other Axel interrupted. "They've already locked onto this universe. They'll be here soon." As if on cue, alarms began to blare throughout the lab. Red warning lights flashed, and the sound of heavy boots echoed from the corridor outside. "Quick," Zara said, grabbing both Axels by the arm. "There's a maintenance tunnel behind that panel. We can use it to escape." As they pried open the panel and squeezed into the narrow tunnel, Zara's mind raced. How had their exciting discovery turned into this nightmare so quickly? And more importantly, what were they going to do now? They crawled through the dusty tunnel, the sound of pursuit growing fainter behind them. Finally, they emerged into a deserted alley behind the research facility. The cool night air was a shock after the stuffy confines of the tunnel. "We need to keep moving," the other Axel said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Is there somewhere safe we can go?" Zara thought quickly. "My apartment. It's not far from here, and my roommate is out of town this week." They made their way through the quiet streets, constantly on alert for any sign of pursuit. When they finally reached Zara's small apartment, all three collapsed onto the couch, exhausted and overwhelmed. "Okay," Zara said, turning to their visitor. "I think it's time you told us exactly what's going on in your universe." The other Axel ran a hand through his graying hair, his face etched with worry. "It's a long story, but I'll try to give you the short version. In our world, the discovery of parallel universes happened much earlier. At first, it was hailed as the greatest scientific breakthrough in history. But then..." He paused, his eyes distant. "Then the government got involved. They saw the potential for exploitation, for gaining advanced technology or resources from other universes. They created the quantum police to control all access to the multiverse." "But that's insane," Axel interjected. "The scientific possibilities alone were completely ignored," the other Axel finished. "Science took a backseat to power and greed. Anyone caught trying to access other universes without authorization was arrested, or worse." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "So when we opened the portal, you triggered their alarms," the other Axel confirmed. "They'll stop at nothing to shut down unauthorized access points. And they won't care that your world doesn't have the same laws. To them, you're criminals who need to be stopped." The implications of this were staggering. Zara and Axel had been so focused on the scientific aspects of their discovery, they had never considered the potential political ramifications. Now, they were caught in the middle of an interdimensional conflict they barely understood. "What about the other me?" Zara asked suddenly. "Why didn't she come through with you?" The other Axel's face fell. "Zara. My Zara. She stayed behind to give me time to escape. She's probably been captured by now." The thought of her other self in danger made Zara's stomach churn. "We have to help her." "It's too dangerous," the other Axel said, shaking his head. "The best thing we can do now is figure out how to stop the quantum police from gaining a foothold in this universe." They spent the next few hours discussing strategy, trying to come up with a plan. But the more they talked, the more hopeless it seemed. How could they, three people with limited resources, hope to stand against an interdimensional police force? As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the apartment windows, Zara stood up and stretched. "We need sleep," she announced. "We're not going to solve this if we're exhausted." They took turns using the shower, and Zara found some old clothes of her roommates for the other Axel to wear. As she settled onto the couch she had given her bed to their visitor, Zara felt Axel's arms wrap around her. "Hey," he said softly. "We're going to figure this out, together." Zara leaned into his embrace, drawing comfort from his presence. "I hope you're right," she murmured. "Because if we don't, it's not just us who'll pay the price." They managed to get a few hours of fitful sleep before the sound of a news alert on Zara's phone woke them. Groggily, she reached for the device, but as she read the headline, all traces of sleep vanished. "Guys," she called out, her voice tight with fear. "You need to see this." The others crowded around as she read the news article aloud. Mysterious energy surges detected worldwide. Scientists baffled by phenomenon that seems to defy known laws of physics. "It's starting," the other Axel said grimly. "They're trying to establish a permanent gateway between our universes." Axel frowned. "But wouldn't that be incredibly energy intensive? How could they possibly maintain something like that?" The other Axel's face darkened. "They've developed technology to harvest energy from the quantum foam itself. It's incredibly dangerous and unstable, but they don't care about the risks." Zara's mind raced. If they're using quantum foam, that means their energy signature would be... Wait a second, she grabbed her laptop and began typing furiously. Zara, Axel asked, peering over her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" "If we can identify their energy signature," she explained, her fingers flying over the keyboard, "we might be able to disrupt it. Create a kind of quantum firewall between our universes." The other Axel's eyes widened in realization. Of course, a quantum firewall. It's brilliant. But we'd need access to some serious computing power to pull that off. Zara grinned, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "Lucky for us, I know just where to find it. The Quantum Leap project has a state-of-the-art quantum computer. If we can get access to it, we might have a chance. But Zara," Axel interjected, "that computer is in the lab. The same lab that's probably crawling with quantum police by now." Her grin faltered slightly, but determination quickly took its place. "Then we'll just have to be very, very careful. They spent the next few hours planning their infiltration of the lab." The other Axel proved to be a valuable asset, his experience with the quantum police providing crucial insights into their tactics and weaknesses. As they worked, Zara couldn't help but notice the differences between the two Axels. Her Axel was more carefree, his eyes still bright with the excitement of discovery. The other Axel carried a weight on his shoulders, his eyes haunted by the things he'd seen and done. As night fell, they put their plan into action. Using Zara's access card and some carefully timed movements to avoid security cameras, they managed to slip into the lab undetected. The facility was eerily quiet, most of the staff having been evacuated due to the strange energy surges. They made their way to the quantum computer room, hearts pounding with every step. Just as they reached the door, they heard voices approaching. "Quick, in here," Zara whispered, pulling them into a supply closet. They held their breath as footsteps passed by, the voices growing louder. "Don't care what it takes. Find those kids and shut down their operation. We can't let them interfere." Zara's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice. It was Dr. Emerson, the project lead. But he sounded different, colder somehow. As the footsteps faded away, she exchanged a worried glance with Axel. It seemed the quantum police had already infiltrated their world more than they'd realized. Once the coast was clear, they slipped into the quantum computer room. Zara's fingers flew over the keyboard, initiating the complex calculations needed for the quantum firewall. Axel and his counterpart stood guard, keeping watch for any sign of trouble. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. The computer hummed as it processed the enormous amount of data. Just as the progress bar neared completion, alarms blared throughout the facility. "They've detected us," the other Axel said, his voice tight with tension. "We need to hurry." Zara worked faster, her heart pounding in her ears. She could hear shouting in the distance, growing closer. The progress bar inched towards 100%. "Come on. Come on," she muttered. Suddenly, the door burst open. Dr. Emerson stood there, flanked by two men in sleek, black uniforms. The quantum police. "Step away from the computer, Doctor," Emerson ordered, his voice cold and hard. Zara's fingers hovered over the keyboard. They were so close. "Just a few more seconds. Now, Doctor," Emerson shouted, raising a strange gun-like device. Time seemed to slow down. Zara saw Axel move to stand between her and the intruders. She saw the other Axel lunge for Dr. Emerson. She saw the strange gunfire, a bolt of crackling energy arcing through the air. And then, just as the energy bolt was about to hit Axel, the computer chimed. 100% complete. A wave of energy pulsed outward from the quantum computer, passing harmlessly through Zara and the Axels, but causing Dr. Emerson and the quantum police to flicker like bad holograms. They let out cries of surprise and pain before vanishing completely. For a moment, there was silence. Then Zara let out a whoop of joy. We did it. The quantum firewall is up. Axel pulled her into a tight hug, laughing with relief. You're amazing, you know that. The other Axel smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. It worked here, but my world is still under their control. And Zara? My Zara is still in danger. Zara pulled away from Axel, her face set with determination. Then we're not done yet. Now that we know how to create the firewall, we can take the fight to them. Axel nodded in agreement. She's right. We can't just leave your world to suffer. The other Axel looked between them, hope dawning in his eyes. You'd really do that? Risk everything to help a world that isn't even yours? Of course, Zara said firmly. That's what scientists do. We help people, no matter what universe they're from. As they began to plan their next move, Zara felt a mix of excitement and fear. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The multiverse was bigger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. But standing there with Axel by her side and their interdimensional ally, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did they know, their adventures were just beginning. The quantum firewall had repelled the immediate threat, but it had also sent ripples through the multiverse. In distant realities, other versions of themselves were awakening to the truth of the multiverse. Some would become allies in the fights to come. Others, well, not every version of oneself turns out to be a friend. As they left the lab, slipping out into the cool night air, Zara looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the veil of their reality, countless other Zaras were looking up at those same stars. The thought filled her with a sense of wonder and purpose. They had stumbled upon something greater than themselves, and now they had a responsibility to protect it. So Axel said, taking her hand as they walked. Ready to save the multiverse? Zara squeezed his hand, a smile playing on her lips. With you. Always. The other Axel walked a few steps behind them, lost in thought. He was grateful for their help, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they didn't truly understand what they were getting into. The quantum police were just the tip of the iceberg. There were forces at play in the multiverse that defied imagination. But for now, he kept these thoughts to himself. They would face those challenges when the time came. As they disappeared into the night, the lab behind them hummed with energy. The quantum firewall pulsed, invisible to the naked eye but felt by every atom in their universe. It was a beacon, a challenge, and a promise. The game had changed, and the players were assembling. The fate of not just one world, but countless realities, hung in the balance. In the days that followed, Zara, Axel, and their interdimensional counterpart worked tirelessly to prepare for their journey to the other universe. They knew they couldn't simply barge in without a plan. The quantum police would be expecting them, and they needed every advantage they could get. Zara focused on refining the quantum firewall technology, working to make it more portable. If they could create localized fields, it would give them a significant edge in confrontations with the quantum police. Axel, meanwhile, dove deep into the theoretical aspects of interdimensional travel, looking for any loopholes or weaknesses they could exploit. The other Axel proved to be an invaluable resource. He provided detailed information about the structure and operations of the quantum police, as well as the political landscape of his world. It was a grim picture. He painted a world where scientific discovery had been stifled, where the wonders of the multiverse were hoarded by a select few for their own gain. As they worked, Zara found herself growing closer to both Axels. Her feelings for her own Axel deepened, their shared passion for science and discovery forming an unbreakable bond. But she also felt a connection to the other Axel, a kinship born of shared purpose and the weight of responsibility they both carried. One evening, as they were taking a rare break from their preparations, Zara found the other Axel alone on the balcony of her apartment. Staring out at the city lights. Penny, for your thoughts, she asked, joining him at the railing. He gave her a sad smile. Just thinking about home. About my Zara. Wondering if she's okay. Zara felt a pang in her heart. We'll find her, she said firmly. We'll make things right. The other Axel turned to her, his eyes intense. You know, seeing you and, well, me, together in this world, it makes me realize what I missed out on. What do you mean? Zara asked. Though she had a feeling she knew. In my world, Zara and I, we never took that step. We were always just colleagues, friends. I think we were both too afraid of complicating things, he sighed. And now, seeing what could have been, I regret not taking that chance. Zara placed a comforting hand on his arm. It's not too late. When we find her, if we find her, he interrupted. When we find her, Zara insisted. You'll have another chance. Don't waste it. He nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Thank you, Zara, for everything. As they stood there in comfortable silence, Zara's mind wandered to the challenges that lay ahead. They were about to leap into the unknown, facing dangers they could scarcely imagine. But looking at the determination on the other Axel's face, feeling the warmth of her own Axel's love, she knew they could face anything as long as they were together. The next morning, they made their final preparations. Zara had managed to miniaturize the quantum firewall technology into a device the size of a smartphone. Axel had developed a theory about how to navigate the spaces between universes more efficiently. And the other Axel had drawn up detailed plans of the quantum police headquarters in his world. As they stood in the lab, ready to activate the portal that would take them to the other universe, Zara felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was it. The moment that would change everything. Remember, the other Axel said, his voice tense. Once we're through, we'll only have a few minutes before the quantum police detect our presence. We need to move fast. Zara and Axel nodded, their faces set with determination. With a deep breath, Zara activated the portal. The familiar vortex of energy appeared, swirling and pulsing with power. But this time, instead of just looking through, they were going to step through. Ready? Axel asked, taking Zara's hand. She squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch. Ready? Together, they stepped into the unknown, the other Axel right behind them. As the portal engulfed them, Zara felt a sensation like being pulled in every direction at once. Colors and shapes blurred around them, reality itself seeming to bend and twist. And then, suddenly it was over. They stumbled out onto solid ground, gasping for breath. As Zara's vision cleared, she found herself staring at a world both familiar and alien. They were in a version of their lab, but everything was sleeker, more advanced. Through the windows, she could see a city that looked like something out of a science fiction movie, with flying vehicles zipping between towering skyscrapers. Welcome to my world, the other Axel said grimly. Now, the real challenge begins. Before they could take another step, alarms began to blare. A computerized voice echoed through the lab. Unauthorized interdimensional travel detected. Quantum police en route. Please remain where you are. So much for the element of surprise, Axel muttered. Zara quickly activated the portable quantum firewall, a shimmering bubble of energy enveloping them. This should buy us some time, but we need to move. Where to? The other Axel pointed to a door on the far side of the lab. That way. There's a transport tube that can get us to the central district. That's where they'll be holding Zara. As they raced towards the door, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor beyond. The quantum police had arrived. Hold it right there, a voice commanded as the door burst open. A squad of officers in sleek, black uniforms poured into the room. Weapons raised. But their energy weapons sputtered uselessly against the quantum firewall. Zara, Axel, and the other Axel used the moment of confusion to push past them, sprinting down the corridor towards the transport tube. As they ran, Zara's mind raced. They had made it to this new universe, but they were already on the defensive. How were they going to find and rescue the other Zara? And even if they did, how could they hope to change an entire world's relationship with the multiverse? But as she glanced at Axel running beside her, saw the determination on his face that mirrored her own, she felt a surge of hope. They had come this far. They had already done the impossible. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The adventure that had begun with a curious teenager's unauthorized experiment had become a battle for the very nature of reality itself. And it was only just beginning.